All right, everyone. Today, I'm going to show you what I did to my stock LCP Max trigger. All right. Now, I put this trigger back in just to show you guys. And if you see there, you'll notice that my trigger is not sticking out as yours may be. All right. I short stroked this trigger before I swap the trigger out to the red trigger here. All right. And what I'll do is I'll break it back down. I'll take the trigger out and I'll actually show you guys this hack. Okay. I'm gonna have to do it off camera because YouTube, policy won't allow us to, show you guys us breaking down the lower and, doing all that kind of stuff. All right. So let me do that off camera and then I'll come back. But the main thing I want you to pay attention to is if you look at the new trigger, right? This little bump in the front, okay? And that's what reduces the travel, all right? So with this trigger, it's built in. So just pay attention to that. And you can always rewind back to that point as well. But that's the main thing that you need to pay attention to, okay? And I'll show you why once I get my modified trigger out. All right. And it doesn't reduce, the trigger pull weight or anything like that. All it does is just shorten down a lot of that sloppy or long pre-travel. Okay. That's the only thing it does is it reduces that. All right. All right. I'll see you guys in a second. All right. We got the stock trigger out. Here's what it looks like after I modified it. And I actually short stroked this trigger before I knew that they sold an aftermarket short stroke trigger. All right. I just didn't record the video back then when I did it. So here's what you need to do this. All right. First thing you're going to need is this very small screw. All right. And the head of the screw needs to be this size, which you'll find out in 1 second. All right. So I went through about 4 or 5 different screws and tested them out. And this is the only one that would work. Okay. Now here's why. There you go. So this spring is for your safety blade. All right. When this spring comes out, it sits actually in a little groove or a little hole, a little channel right there. Okay. That's the same space that you're going to put your screw in. As you can see, that's my screw right there. All right. This is the only location that the screw can actually go in. You don't have a lot of room to work with. All right, so all I did was I started the screw in on a slight angle. Okay. And you can kind of change direction a little bit if you get the angle off as you start going in. So you just have to, screw in, and once you break the surface, just keep, taking a look at it. All right. Now it has to line up on that angle precisely. All right. Because when you go to put the trigger back together, the spring has to sit in that groove. All right. Let me show you. It has to have somewhere to go. See, it slides right over the screw. And then when you put your blade on, that keeps the tension on there. So your safety blade will work. Okay. You cannot use this top channel or groove just because that's where the pin goes in the top of the trigger that holds the trigger in. All right, so you definitely can't use that. All right, so you only have one option. Now, once you get your screw in there, and let me show you, so just so you can see, the spring has to be able to fit over the screw. See? All right, so what you do is, as you start getting your screw in and trying to get your angle right and lining everything up, all right, just go slow. All right, and then you're going to tighten it down almost to all the way. Okay, then you're going to have to put everything back together. As far as the trigger is concerned, get it back in the gun, and then you're going to have to reassemble the firearm and then test everything out. All right, now here's what I noticed. So once you get the screw preset, the travel preset figured out, all right, you can remove a lot of the pre-travel and not have to alter the safety blade at all. Okay, and that'll take out a great amount of the pre-travel. But of course, you know I couldn't stop there, right? So what I did was, once I got it to the furthest point to where the safety blade would work, then I took the gun apart again and I had to find the new limit. Okay, now I removed the most amount of pre-travel out of the trigger, the stock trigger, doing this hack as possible. Okay, and in doing so, you're gonna have to shave down the safety blade on the top. All right, let me make sure I'm showing you the right part. Okay, let's get the focus right. There it is. So similar shape. All I did was just slowly grinded it down. All right, and here's what I used. Stone set. So you just pick an attachment and put it on your tool, and then you just slowly grind away. And this is what takes the longest part, because you have to figure out how much material you need to remove slowly, okay? Because you need your trigger safety to still work. If something happens, you get in a shooting and they're going to break your firearm down. And if your safety blade doesn't work, then you can get charged. They can charge you, you know, for that. The prosecutor can come after you, okay? So after a few times of figuring out how much I need to shave off, you'll know how much you need to shave off, because as you're going bit by bit, the safety blade won't work, and then you'll get it to a certain point to where the trigger will be operational. All right. Okay, so that's the hardest part. So once you get through with that and you get the actual distance that you want to set your screw in, then you pretty much got it all mocked up, right? So you break the gun back down, you take the trigger out, okay? And you'll notice my screw looks funny here, okay? You can actually stop at this point, all right? You can actually stop right here. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to make the modification, you know, permanent, so it wouldn't move, you know, even though it's a screw, it probably won't move, but you never know. The trigger is going to keep hitting up against the housing every time you shoot the gun. All right, so I didn't want to take any chances. So what I did is I backed the screw almost all the way out, And then I use the clear Gorilla Glue super glue. Okay. And then I put a little bit of Gorilla Glue on the shaft of the screw. And then I set it back in the same place where I had it mocked up. All right. Do not put the spring in right after you do that, because if you do, you're going to glue your spring to the screw. All right. And you need that spring to be able to come in and out of there so you can disassemble the trigger and pop the pin out that holds the trigger in. All right. So once you let it sit for long enough and you let the screw dry on the back, you're good to go. So you got to get it, you got to get the position right. You got to get it locked in place. All right, before it dries. Now, once that happens, you're pretty much set. Okay. Now I would say after that point where it's glued in and it's, it can't move, then you can really stop there. All right. And you can just go ahead and put your spring back in. All right. Put your safety blade. I always get this wrong. All right. And you're really good to go. But I wanted to finish it off and, kind of just make it look a little bit more professional. All right. Because you're not going to see this screw, as you'll see later on. You're not going to see it anyway. All right. Unless you have the trigger pressed all the way back. Okay. All right. So what I did to take it a step further was we were all set in place, safety blade, everything was ready to go, gun was operational, everything was working. And this is just the cosmetic part. So I took some blue painter's tape from Home Depot and taped around the area where our screw is, okay? Then I took JB Weld, and it's 2 tubes. So I mixed the stuff together. So that's the hardener and the sealing and all that stuff. So I mixed it together and I started applying the JB Weld, just building up the surface area. Okay. Now everything was taped off on the trigger. So the only thing was exposed was the screw sticking up. And I did the JB Weld 2 or 3 times just to build it up, let it dry, build it up, let it dry, and so on. Okay. And it pretty much was the shape that it is now. I just wanted to have a little more on there so I can sand it and smooth it down. Okay. Once the JB Weld dried, then I sand down the rough edges. Okay. And when the JB Weld dries, it was gray. All right. So now that I had everything sanded, okay, my sandpaper kind of tore up the tape a little bit. So I just put a little bit more tape on there once I got the shape to where I wanted it. And the whole trigger was covered. And then I just took some black spray paint and just shot the black spray paint a couple times over the JB Weld. And then it blended in. All right. And then that's how I got to this point. All right. So that way everything will just look a little, it'll look uniform and not just have a screw hanging out. But as far as function, you don't have to go through that extra step there. But I just wanted to finish it off. And then once I got that spray paint all dried, then I just reassembled everything. Okay. And got everything back in the gun. All right. And it was already test fitted. So, we knew before the cosmetic and the painting and all that kind of stuff that it was already, operational and functional. All right. So now you check it out with the trigger back in the gun. And the screw stops the movement. So that's what reduces the pre-travel. Okay. It hits the front right here. And that's all this trigger does. Same thing. It's just built into the trigger here. All right. All right. I'll be back in 1 second. Voila. All right, guys, check it out. All right. So as you can see, if you look down in there real closely, all right, and that's all this one does. Same thing. That shelf or bump or little build up on the front there. It does the same thing exactly as I just did. All right. Guess what? You can't even see it. So it's tucked up in there, right? Safety blade is working. You know, look. You try to pull the trigger on the sides, it's not going anywhere. Safety blade is working. And you can't see it. All right, so the moment that you all been waiting for, all right? Here's the take up. Let me move my fingers out the way so you can kind of see it. That's the wall, all right? That's the wall right there. All right. Let's do the reset. Nice audible positive reset. Try to move my other fingers out the way so you can kind of see in that gap. All right, guys, you can thank me by sharing this video. All right. Hitting that like button. And subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. All right, guys, see you on the next one.